Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. HTM here, and we are less than a week away from the ESO Greymoor chapter arriving on PC and Mac, with console release shortly thereafter. And if you are coming back to the Elder Scrolls Online, you might be wondering what's new and is the Greymoor chapter worth buying? That's the topic of today's video, so let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about what's new. ESO Greymoor is the new Quarter 2 DLC, also known as a chapter for the Elder Scrolls Online, which is generally the largest DLC that the game receives for the whole year. Now, the developers have stated that there's probably around 30 to 40 hours of content to explore here, and I actually think it's probably a little bit more than that when you consider all the side quests, the locations, the achievements, mastering the new content like the new trial, or the new Antiquities system, and gathering new gear sets for your characters. We'll cover more of this later on, but let's just say there is a lot of content here to discover. Now, as far as the story, I don't want to spoil anything here, but what I have played of the story is fantastic, with great characters, great voice acting, and locations, both for the main quests and the side quests. And can we talk about these locations for a minute, because they are absolutely gorgeous. From the mountains of Skyrim down to the depths of Blackreach, there's just so much to explore and it all looks amazing. And if you want that Skyrim nostalgia, you will definitely get a hefty dose of it here by returning to those iconic Skyrim locations like Solitude, Morthal, the Dragon Bridge, and my personal favorite, Blackreach. And on top of that, of course, you have new delves, new public dungeons, and the new trial, Kyne's Aegis, all of which offer new enemies and new challenges to overcome, and of course, new loot to gather up for your characters. We've got new overland sets, new crafted sets, and new trial sets, some of which are actually fairly good, and I think players will definitely want to invest the time in getting some of these, both for PvE and for PvP builds. Now, with most chapter releases, ESO brings in new systems for players to learn and further advance their characters, and this brings us to Antiquities, which is a really unique and interesting system added to the Elder Scrolls Online for the Greymoor chapter. Antiquities is basically Tamriel's version of archaeology, where you work to discover the locations of ancient artifacts. This is called scrying. Then you search out those locations and you dig them up through excavation. So you have the two new skill lines, scrying and excavation, both of which you use together to uncover an antiquity item. Now, in terms of these artifacts, you can get a lot of good rewards from this new system, including just raw gold or items to sell for gold. You've got housing, furnishings, new armor and weapon motifs, new mounts, you've got new PvP siege weapons, and even the new one-piece item sets called mythic items, which offer extremely strong bonuses for your character. For example, you have Malakith's Band of Brutality, which increases your damage done by a whopping 25%, but removes your ability to do critical strikes. And the Snow Treader Boots, which make you immune to roots and snares, but also remove your ability to sprint while in combat. Now keep in mind, you can only have one mythic item equipped on your character at a time, so they are limited in that sense. They are not tradable, they're not sellable. And you'll have to be at the highest rank of scrying and excavating to start unlocking these items. Now, I will admit, I was a bit skeptical of Antiquities at first. Yes, the skill line does take a long time to level. And yes, scrying and excavating both look more like mobile games you might play on your phone rather than anything that belongs in ESO. But after trying out the system myself, I quickly started enjoying the progression, the unique lore, and the items I was uncovering. The Antiquity system itself is actually very addicting and fun to play, and I am definitely looking forward to more of it. Vampires and werewolves have always been part of the Elder Scrolls Online, and these skill lines are now being updated with the release of the Greymoor chapter. Now, it's important to note here that the vampire and werewolf changes I'm about to go over are actually part of the base game and not the chapter release. So you don't need to purchase the Greymoor chapter to see these changes in effect, even though they are part of the same patch update. Thematically though, these changes do fit with the overall story arc for the game, but since you don't need to purchase the chapter for these, I think we need to ask the question, are the changes good and are they worth playing? And if you have a vampire or werewolf build, maybe Gathering Dust, is it now going to be worth coming back to with the Greymoor update? Let's start with discussing werewolf skill changes first because they are easier to explain. Are werewolf builds better in the Greymoor patch than previously? I would say without a doubt, yes. First, for group DPS, you will notice an improvement in what your werewolf can do. You don't have to just sit there and spam light attacks anymore. You can create an actual DPS rotation that involves all 5 werewolf abilities. For example, werewolves now have their first execute style ability, a bleed effect that gets more powerful the lower health your enemy has, and stamina sustain on demand through the new Herstein's Bounty skill. And for the first time ever, werewolf tanking is actually a thing if you want to try it out. While werewolves don't have a taunt specifically, they can now get one with the updated Tormentor set. Also, the Direwolf morph of the werewolf ultimate now comes complete with a 10% damage mitigation bonus and passive minor courage for you and your group. So that's definitely great in terms of tank builds. Now let's talk about vampire changes, which are much more extensive. Instead of the little changes here and there like we have with the werewolf skill line, we have essentially a complete rework of the entire skill line for vampires, including brand new abilities and a new ultimate, and a complete visual transformation while in the ultimate called the Blood Scion. Speaking of the visuals here first, I think they've done a decent job at creating a more dramatic vampire look for all the abilities, but some of the animations are clearly reused from other skills already in the game. For example, the new Blood for Blood ability is just an updated version of the Searing Strike animation from the Dragon Knight class, and the Blood Scion transformation seems more like a reskinned Bone Goliath animation from the Necro ult. However, some of the visuals are unique, like the new Hypnotize ability, which looks fantastic, and the new feeding animations are especially brutal and fun to watch. Now, are vampire builds going to be competitive for things like endgame dungeons and trials? Well, no, not really. The vampire skill line's main problem is the increased cost of abilities you get while you're in the higher stages. Now, personally, I think this is okay. I mean, in the past, the vampire skill line in ESO was really only used for the passives that offered things like extra recovery and damage reduction, meaning almost any build could be a vampire and get those extra bonuses with very little downside. So you had lots and lots of vampires, who were basically only vampires for the passives. Instead, now you actually need to think about and invest into your vampire build to make it work, and not every class will benefit, honestly. And remember, vampire is not a full class on its own. It's just 5 skills and an ultimate that is meant to give more options to your build, so you can make your character the way you want. And I think it does still fulfill that purpose for many players, even more so if you, like me, you enjoy soloing in the Elder Scrolls Online, if you enjoy role-playing, or if you just want to have fun designing a unique vampire build. Speaking of vampire builds, I do have several already on the channel that I've put together that are very fun to play, so check those out when you get a chance. I'll have links for those in the description as well. Now, if you're returning to ESO after some time off, there's one more major change you need to know, and that is the great monster set balance pass of 2020 coming in the Greymoor patch. Nearly every monster set in the game is being balanced, and this could definitely affect your build, as some sets have increased in power while others definitely saw nerfs. Most notably are some of the original monster sets like Bloodspawn and Troll King, those being knocked down quite a few notches in terms of their overall effectiveness to keep them more in line with all the monster sets. While some other sets like Selene and Celestrix, these actually saw buffs. Some sets like Celestrix no longer have a proc chance, but nearly every monster set in the game saw a change of some sort. And for that full list of monster set changes, check out the video I did a few weeks ago reviewing all the updates. I'll have that linked in the description down below as well. So let's finally answer the question, is the new Greymoor chapter content worth buying for you? I think the answer depends on what you're looking for. On the negative side, there is no new class in the Greymoor chapter like we saw in last year's chapter in Elsewhere with the Necromancer class. There are no significant class balance changes or combat changes, no new weapon or combat related skills. I mean, other than the few that you get with the vampire and werewolf changes, but again, those are base game changes not tied to this chapter, so you can't really base your purchase off of those. Then there's no major changes to PvP content in Cyrodiil or even in Battlegrounds, no new Battleground modes or maps. So if you're looking for fresh combat experiences in Greymoor, then you're probably not going to find that here, unfortunately. I mean, for me, as I primarily play ESO for combat and its combat systems and skill lines, I have to admit I was definitely disappointed at first with the lack of changes in this area. Basically then what you're buying into and what the developers have invested their time into this year is the Western Skyrim zone itself, including Creach, the accompanying story and the side quests, the new trial, the new gear sets, and Antiquities. That's it. That's the chapter. Now, some of those new gear sets are pretty nice, and as we've said, Antiquities can be very fun. It's a great, just chill activity with some great rewards if you like that sort of thing. But what I think it really comes down to is Western Skyrim in Creach. If you want to explore some of the most well-designed and detailed locations we've ever seen in the Elder Scrolls Online and uncover an entirely new storyline, a new cast of characters, then Greymoor is going to be a blast. It honestly is some of the best ESO content we've ever seen in terms of location and story, and that's saying a lot. For me, the Greymoor chapter isn't what I was expecting for ESO's return to Skyrim, with its major focus being on those locations and those story beats and the lore, but I have still enjoyed it quite a bit, and that's what matters the most. So if you're curious, I will be buying the chapter and continuing to create Greymoor builds and guides right here on the channel. I will be enjoying Skyrim and Creach on day one, and I will be digging up those antiquities and battling vampires, and I hope to see you there too. Of course, if this new chapter doesn't really match with what you wanted in ESO, I totally understand that too. I understand that disappointment, and I'm still hoping for things like better class balance, for a champion point system rework of some kind for better performance, and we'll see what the next year brings in terms of those quality of life changes that we still really need in the game. Until then, thanks for watching this review. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed here for more ESO guides and build videos with your notifications turned on so you don't miss anything. I hope you all are doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.